Part 31. Shao's sweet wife, she is doted on. Author, Jin Yet. Chapter 301. Chapter 301. If you are interested. Su-Yun knew that if she continued to delay like this, she would only be more greedy for his embrace. She turned her head away from him and said coolly, "Let's go." As soon as his hand touched the car door, he pulled him back again. "How do you plan to go back? Or climb over the wall?" Even though there is nothing wrong with her skills, she is still worried about her flipping in and out like this. After all, it is a 5-meter high wall. "No need." Su-Yun smiled nonchalantly and said, "Of course someone will open the door for me." She leaned forward and stole a kiss on the corner of his lips, then opened the car door and got out of the car at a very fast speed. Yao. The little thing's movements were so fast that he didn't even react. Now he was watching his woman walk towards the gate of the courtyard. There is a lamp in front of the door. It is very bright at the door, but you can also see clearly that the cold door is locked. Su-Yun walked straight to the door, raised her hand as if to knock on the door, but stopped when she was about to touch it, turned around unhurriedly, and leaned against the door. She looked around with her eyes, but there was no one around. She glanced slowly at Yao's car parked under the shade of a tree, and then suddenly said loudly, "Come out. Open the door for me." Yao. There was silence everywhere. No one could respond to her. "I'm counting to 3. If you don't come out and open the door for me, I won't go in. Just get out of this place." She just spoke to the air like this, without feeling embarrassed at all, and she counted really seriously. 1, 2. Yao immediately knew what she was going to do. Jin spent so much effort to lock her up here. Although the courtyard seemed to be very strong, it would definitely be guarded by people. Even though there seemed to be no one here, he couldn't sit still safely. "Can you see what's going on over there from inside the car?" Furthermore, although her move looks ordinary, it is indeed very effective. At this moment, she was outside the door but not inside the door. If she really raised her foot and left, then all Jin's efforts would have been in vain. Sure enough, before she could shout 3, someone trotted over from a dark place on the side. "No, no, no, don't go." Raising her eyebrows, Su-Yun adjusted her posture, still leaning against the door, but facing the direction of the person. The trot came over panting, with a slumped face and a helpless face. "Miss Su, you can't leave. Can to show up." The other party probably felt very embarrassed, so he didn't say anything and just made a bowing gesture with his hands. He couldn't help but ask, "How did you get out? I didn't see you. Is there anything strange about this? Didn't I see you just now?" She replied casually, "The man." Knowing that he was in the wrong, he said nothing more. Su-Yun also made room. He reached out and pressed the password. While pressing the password, he carefully observed Su-Yun to prevent her from peeking. Looking at his cautious look, Su-Yun only felt funny. It is not a crime to peek. It is a password lock like this. Now that she has remembered the password, they can change it when she hands it over. There is nothing to peek at. There was a clear beep sound, and the door opened. The man now knew that the gentle-looking girl in front of him was actually not that easy to deal with, so he said politely, "Miss Su, please." When Su-Yun entered the door, she put her hands behind her back and made an OK gesture. She knew that Yao could see from this direction. Seeing the door close in front of his eyes again, Yao shook his head and then realized that the corners of his lips had been raised. She has enough ability to protect herself, which is good, although even if she cannot protect herself, I can still protect her. Su-Yun's guess was correct. Jin came directly to the door the next day. She came quite early, and while she was still enjoying breakfast, there was a knock on the door outside. Without raising her eyelids, she continued eating unhurriedly. When Jin walked in, He saw the toast in her hand. It's really early. You are more diligent than I expected. He clapped his hands and praised her. However, Suyun looked at him with an expression like, you are an idiot. Diligent, does eating breakfast mean she is diligent? Where did he see it? But there was no response in response to the praise. He touched his nose and then said, I think your memory is not that bad. You should remember who I am now, right? I don't care who you are, I just want to know, what are you going to do? He put down the half-left piece of toast in his hand, wiped his hands, and then looked at him and spoke. It's not that she wasted food, it was just that the fast food in the refrigerator here was too unpalatable. She had only been away for 2 days, and she actually missed President Sida's home-cooked food. Puckering her lower lip, she felt that her stomach was being teased by him. Her question was something he expected. He-jin smiled, pulled out a chair without politeness and sat down opposite her. Are you interested in joining the Perfumery Association? I thought that when you came today, you still wanted to compete with me. The competition is indeed about competition, but besides that, don't you have a future plan for yourself? After a pause, He-jin continued, I know that you rejected Mr. Will's invitation in France. Insist on returning to China. I have also heard your patriotic remarks, which I appreciate, but, apart from patriotism, do you have no other plans? For example, join the Fragrance Association, become a member of the association, and then become a member of the association. Director, or even become vice president or president one day. Then what? Reach the pinnacle of life. Following his words, she had no feeling about what he said, and there was no wave in her heart. Yes, nodding affirmatively, He-jin felt that she had been attracted. After returning from France, he sent people to investigate and research this girl, but there was not much information about her, especially before going to college. He only knew that she was from the Chu family, and she was also a foreign relative. After all, she is just a granddaughter, and her surname is not Chu. Life after college is a bit more interesting. I have a boyfriend I have been dating for several years, but they broke up more than a year ago. The quarrel was quite fierce. He was on several trending searches. After a big fight, he turned away. Just jumped to a rival company. Of course, the most exciting thing is that she is engaged to Yao, the president of UniAsia. There are rumors, but a formal ceremony has not been held yet. There are many interesting things hidden in this woman. Of course, what concerned and surprised him the most was her quality and ability as a perfumer. Such talents should be discovered and used for one's own use. If you're interested, I can help you. After talking about temptation, he naturally wanted to extend an olive branch. He believed that she would make the right choice. End of this chapter. Shao's sweet wife, she is doted on. Author, Jin Yet. Chapter 302. Chapter 302. A family should be together. What if I'm not interested? He-jin was surprised. Are you sure? It would be understandable if she wanted to seek development overseas, but she has rejected Mr. Will's invitation and insists on developing domestically. Since she has chosen to stay in China, the Perfumery Industry Association, as the most authoritative entity in the country, offers an olive branch that is simply irresistible. Is she not interested? I'm afraid it's not just playing hard to get. So, Mr. He took great pains to get me here just to talk about this, then you are really spending too much money. It can be solved with just a phone call. Since we have already reached this point, it is better to say it clearly and avoid talking in roundabout ways, which is very tiring. Liar, He-jin shook his head and smiled, I invite you very sincerely, how can I lie? Besides, isn't the food and accommodation here good? If you can join the association, you can stay in the imperial city. Not only that, you can also have access to all the top spices and raw materials you can imagine. In addition, the benefits of the association are also very good. I dare say that what you can get is definitely not as good as in the freshman. Get less. Mister, he knows what my salary is as a freshman? Are you sure it will be higher than my previous salary? She asked with a smile, neither salty nor cool. He-jin paused for a moment and understood what she meant. Yes, I know that as a freshman, as an ordinary perfumer, although I don't get much, as the wife of the future president of Huanya, I don't care about money. But, adding emphasis, he leaned forward and moved closer to her, you may not care about money and other external things, but as a professional perfumer, don't you want the most top-notch, even top-secret spices? Don't you want to be exposed to more and better advanced instruments and exchange experiences with top talents? We can give you what Uniaja can give you, and we can also give you what Uniaja can't give you. He boasted loudly and looked confident and proud. Soo-yoon fell silent. One thing is true, she may not care about other things, but those spices are her beloved ones. With Huanya's financial resources and strength, it is indeed possible to collect what you want, but after all, it is a very laborious matter. But it is different for the association. After all, there is a solid backer behind it. Also has branches all over the country. After all, it is a professional level. Just. It sounds very good, but I'm still not interested, she shrugged and said, if there is nothing else, I want to catch up on some sleep. After all, I slept a little late yesterday. He-jin. Before he could speak, she continued, by the way, if Mr. He has nothing else to do, I plan to go back to Sioux City this afternoon. Thank you very much for your hospitality these 2 days. Soo-yoon, you will regret it? Unexpectedly, He-jin could not help but stand up and look at her back and said after being rejected so completely. Maybe she said this without any hesitation on her face, but at least it won't happen now. I never expected that it would be such an unhappy separation. He-jin entered the door confidently, never expecting to be rejected, let alone how to deal with the rejection. From the bottom of his heart, he didn't think he would be rejected, and was even prepared for her to burst into tears of gratitude. This was completely different from what he expected. It wasn't until her figure disappeared around the corner that she turned around and strode out of the door. She thought for a moment and then stopped, standing in the yard and looking up. In addition to the various spices planted in the courtyard, there is only one big tree in the middle, which is very lush and verdant. The courtyard wall is so high, almost as high as the prison wall, and the door has not been damaged. The only thing the possible way out is precisely this most unlikely courtyard wall. Put this courtyard wall. I raised my finger and wanted to add a layer of power grid, but I thought it might be a bit too much, not to mention that the power grid was not installed as soon as I was told. He said in frustration, forget it, moved his eyes to the tree, and thought for a moment, have someone chop this tree down, the sooner the better. Master. This tree has been in this yard for many years. It is not easy to grow into what it is today. How can it be cut down just like that? Cut it off, it's an eyesore to me, he said unhappily. He knew that the Chu family would meet again, but their reunion was limited, and they couldn't fly out of thin air. All he could think of was that they relied on this tree, so he simply cut it down. In fact, He-jin was thinking in the right direction, but what he didn't know was that Sci-Yao had already arrived in the imperial capital, right under his nose. With him here, even if 10 more layers of power grids were installed in this yard, Soo-yoon would not be trapped at all. As for Soo-yoon, she really went upstairs to sleep. After all, she had an appointment today and had to go to the little girl to get goods and make a contract. Sci-Yao was actually not idle. After making sure that his young wife was safe and sound, he decided to deal with the matter in Sioux City. Even though his little wife is so capable, he still has to work hard to help her get rid of some hidden risk factors. Mr. Secretary, Mr. Su has kept his promise and sent Miss Su abroad, and promised not to return to China in these years. Our people watched her get on the plane and leave with our own eyes. After Su Feng reported the situation there, he asked, then, Miss Yun's side, do you want to send someone to give a warning? No need, he said coldly, his eyes filled with frost. Yun Chugzyo, what she did seemed to be no different from Su Jinran, but the difference was huge. Over the years, he was not unaware of Su Jinran's obsession with him. Although she had explicitly rejected him many times, her presence had indeed saved a lot of trouble and blocked a lot of rotten romances, so it was a bit of a surprise. A laissez-faire attitude of letting things go. He felt that he still had some responsibilities, and because of his relationship with the Su family, he was merciful to Su Jinran. But Yun Chugzyo is different. I am not familiar with her, at least I know that such a person exists, but she has taken full advantage of Su Jinran, and even tried to climb into his bed. This woman is too scheming and her methods are too despicable. Warning, it is too easy for her, she must be taught a severe lesson. Has that illegitimate son of Yun Zhongcheng returned to the Yun family? He asked slowly. Su Feng nodded. Yun Zhongcheng can't wait. Yun Boqian's physical condition is not good recently. In addition, the Yun family has discussed several new projects and is in urgent need of manpower. Yun Zhongcheng should want to fill in the illegitimate child at this time, step by step. Get used to it. That's good, the family should be together. Hand on his chin with one hand, he said. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Shao's sweet wife, she is doted on. Author, Jin Yet. Chapter 303. Chapter 303. What to say about brotherly love at this time? Yun Chugzyo really has no intention to pay attention to Su Yun these days. A bigger trouble at home is coming. No matter how reluctant she was, no matter how hard she tried to exclude him, it was a step too late. Yun Zhongcheng just brought in the from outside, and even changed his surname to let him recognize his ancestors. Just looking at that bastard, Yun Chugzyo turned around and went to find her uncle Yun Boqian. She knew very well that her mother could no longer stop this matter. If anyone else could stop her madness, the only father is his uncle. Uncle, I heard that you haven't been in good health recently. This is a nutritional supplement that I specially brought back from abroad. I hope it will help your body. She pointed to the things she brought with a smile. A well-behaved and clever person. Yun Boqian nodded and coughed a few times. I wonder if you have any intention? Why didn't your parents come? My mother has been busy with the Women's Federation recently, and she is also thinking about you very much. She told me to come and see you more often when I have time. As for my father. After a pause, she hesitated and said, he is also very busy. Looking up at her, Yun Boqian smiled and said, he must be busy with your brother's affairs. Hearing this, Yun Chugzyo's heart skipped a beat. It wasn't the unexpected uncle's knowledge, but his attitude. It's not unusual for him to know, but by using the word your brother, does it mean that he has acquiesced? Pursing her lips, she remained calm and composed, smiling and nodding slightly, yes. I didn't expect you, uncle, to know about this. I was afraid that my father was too impatient and didn't inform you. Your dad is quite impatient. Following her words, Yun Boqian added, but it's understandable. It's hard for my uncle to be considerate. I thought he would disagree. Lowering her eyes and looking at her hands, Yun Chugzyo wiped away the light in her eyes. She was quickly thinking about what she should do if her uncle really agreed to this matter. Don't agree? Fundamentally, this matter is your father's private matter. In other words, it's your family's business. What do you want me to say as an uncle? That's not the case. After all, uncle, You are my father's eldest brother and the head of the entire Yun family. You are the dearest and dearest person in my eyes. Our Yun family is so organized because of you, uncle. Only then will we have a place in society, so no matter what, as long as it is for the good of the Yun family, no one of us dares not to listen to you. After speaking in one breath, she looked at Yun Bokin's face carefully, including my father, he will definitely listen to you. Really? Yun Bokin laughed twice, his eyes fell on her, stared into her eyes and asked, then what do you want me to say? Yun Chuxia waved her hands quickly, no, no, how dare I do anything to my uncle? But I thought that my uncle would object to my brother coming in. After all, his identity is not that glorious. You want to say that he is an illegitimate child. Perhaps he said a little too much. Yun Bokin coughed violently, coughed several times, took out a tissue and spit out phlegm, and then he felt better. Uncle, I didn't say that. Regardless of whether he is an illegitimate child or not, he is my father's flesh and blood, and he has the same blood as me. She would never say that she objected, even if she did think so in her heart, at least she would in the eyes of her father and other members of the Yun family. Showing generosity was not because she, the eldest lady, could not tolerate others. You're right, I thought so too, so I didn't stop your father. Nodding seriously, Yun Bokin followed her words. Yun Chuxia. Had she not been sure that she was sitting in the Yun family's mansion, and had she not been sure that the man in front of her was indeed the uncle who had watched her grow up, she would have almost suspected that this was a fake Yun Bokin. But uncle, you are different from me. No matter what my father does, I will support him because I am his daughter, but you are the head of the Yun family. I thought you would care about the Yun family's face. No, I agree with this matter. You also know that it is very unpleasant to hear this kind of thing spread outside. My brother is not very young yet, and my father still wants him to join the company. What will the company's employees and shareholders think then? How can people spread the word? I am worried about the face of our Yun family. As she spoke, she sighed, I know I shouldn't talk about these things, but as a member of the Yun family, I should think more about the Yun family in everything. My dad was a little too impatient this time. When she said these words, Yun Chuxia had a look of anxiety and worry. She seemed to be really thinking about her family's affairs. No matter what she said, her starting point was for the good of the entire Yun family. Shwe, you have really grown up and are now able to worry about your family. Looking at her deeply, Yun Bokin spoke earnestly. To be honest, in the past, I would have really disagreed with your father doing this, but this recent serious illness has made me think more openly. What you said is indeed correct. Although your brother is an illegitimate child, but the blood is the same as yours, it's the blood of the Yun family. As for what the outside world thinks, it's up to them. Our family works together. That's the most important thing. I think you think so too. Yes, right. Taking her words to his side, Yun Chuxia almost lost her composure and got angry. She secretly took a few deep breaths before she recovered. Yes, uncle, you are right. Well, I know you are a good boy. You will understand. He smiled faintly and coughed rapidly again. This time, his face turned red. You see, uncle has been in poor health recently. I won't leave you to eat. Go back and greet your parents for me, and get along well with your brother. You are a good sister and will take good care of your brother. Yes, uncle, don't worry. She forced a smile and stood up. Then I won't disturb uncle's rest. I'll go back first. The response to her was just bursts of coughing. Suppressing her anger and leaving the Yun family mansion, she looked back coldly. Is it true that she is old and confused? They have been fighting for a lifetime, but at this time, there is no talk of brotherly love. This bad old man may not be able to hold on for much longer. He took out a paper towel and wiped the tip of his nose in disgust, as if this could wipe away the dirty air he had just breathed in, and threw the paper away. Since Yoon Bokyeon has no way to start here, he should think of other ways. In short, the Yoon family can only be hers in the future. Sir, the second lady has left. Nodding, Yoon Bokyeon picked up the cup on the table and took a sip of tea. His eyes slowly opened, and a sharp light burst out from them. He was not at all as decadent as before. Bring me the phone. End of this chapter. Shao's sweet wife, she is doted on. Author, Jin Yet. Chapter 304. Chapter 304. Let's get straight to the point, I want to buy it. It was already noon when Soo-yoon woke up. After a good sleep, she felt much more energetic. She sorted herself out and was ready to go out. I asked the little girl to leave her address last night, but I only gave her a phone number. In order to prevent a long night of nightmares, she still had to buy it early. He made a phone call while walking out, but he got through quickly. Little girl, where can we meet later? By the way, do you already have the goods in stock now or what? I want to go to the planting field to take a look first. She finished speaking quickly, and she had already reached the gate. However, the girl's voice came over the phone and said hesitantly, I'm sorry, I won't sell it. I'm boasting, but actually I don't have that much goods. No. The more you are afraid of something getting worse, the more you are afraid of long nights and more dreams, and the result will still change. But, listening to her hesitant look, Soo-yoon always felt that it was not as simple as she said. Are you not satisfied with the price? We can discuss this further. As long as I think the quality of the goods is good, I guarantee that the price will satisfy you, she said affirmatively. But the other party answered her, no, it's not about the price. There really aren't that many goods. Hands on her hips, Soo-yoon looked towards the door. The door was tightly closed. Not only that, the big tree in the yard was gone. It was quite noisy when she was sleeping. From the window, she saw Hee-jin ordering people to chop down a tree. But the thing belonged to him and he could chop it down as he pleased. He thought that without the tree, he would be trapped. It's just that now this empty yard doesn't even have a place for shade. Listening to the depressing words makes me even more irritated. Okay, it doesn't matter if you don't have that many. You tell me where you found it, or how many you have left. I want all of them. If that doesn't work, if you know someone who can plant and cultivate them, you can introduce them to me. Then, after a moment of hesitation, the girl said, I only have one phone number, and only he has it. Okay, give me the phone number, and you don't have to worry about anything else. Hang up the phone and looked at the phone until the text message was sent. She clicked it and looked at it, then dialed it directly. There seemed to be no one on the other end of the phone, and no one answered the phone after ringing for a long time. Soo-yoon didn't know if there was really no one there, or if she didn't answer the phone on purpose, but since she wanted to discuss business, she had to be patient enough. It wasn't until the third time that the call was picked up by someone on the other end, who sounded lazily, who is this? Hello, it's Mu Xiao Xiao who gave me your number. I want to ask, do you have yuko there? The kind of grass in Mu Xiaoxiu's novel is called yunko. Of course, I don't know if she named it herself or if she is ignorant. Anyway, I have never seen it before. Yes, still lazily, what's wrong? Let's get straight to the point, I want to buy it. Is it convenient for us to meet and discuss the price? It's quite convenient for me, but I don't know if it's convenient for you. Soo-yoon felt strange when she heard the voice. It seemed a little familiar. And most importantly, for some reason, she always felt that the voice was very close to her ears. I have nothing to inconvenience, but I hope that when I see you, I can also see Yuko. Not sure if the other party is the real seller, but she will not miss this opportunity. This is no problem, I'm just worried that you can't afford the price. The price is negotiable. We can discuss this after we meet. Soo-yoon did not follow him in circles, Let's make an appointment. How about this afternoon? So anxious, the other party smiled and said, since we are so anxious, we don't need the afternoon. How about, now? Now. She was startled for a moment, and then she saw the door open with a click, and standing at the door was none other than Jin, who had just left in the morning. He was still holding the phone in his hand, and he waved it at her leisurely, with a look of undisguised pride on his face. No wonder the voice sounded so familiar just now. She just didn't expect that it was him again. But yes, he was also there about what happened last night, and he seemed to be another little girl's uncle? So, could it be that he took the first step last night and bought all the grasses? No wonder he said that as long as you join the association, you will have all kinds of rare spices. As long as you listen to him, you will have them, right? Is this a serious threat? I knew you would still take the initiative to find me. Jin walked in with a smile. How about it? Have you thought about it clearly? Are you going to change your mind? This time, Soo-yoon did not refuse directly. She crossed her arms in front of her chest and looked at him and said, why me? What? As you said, it's so difficult to get into the Fragrance Industry Association. There are a lot of people trying to get in every year, so why bother with an unknown person like me? I'm really flattered. An unknown person? Jin shook his head. You are the first unknown person who can refuse an invitation from France's top perfumer. Just because I rejected Mr. Wool. Not entirely. Jin gently rubbed his nose with his fingers. You still beat me. She had no idea that for her, that competition was just a mission sent by the company and an opportunity to prove her ability. But for Jin, it was also an opportunity to prove his ability. To the entire He family, he is a rebel. Instead of engaging in politics and business, he insists on making incense. The old lady of the He family is a stubborn and conservative old-fashioned thinker. She doesn't like her tall and big son to buy perfumes. Those are women's things. Old men tinker with those things all day long. How ridiculous. Jin made a bet with his old lady during the competition in France. He originally planned to come back with a first-place trophy, which would be considered a vindication, but he didn't expect that he would lose to such a little girl. Soo-yoon naturally didn't know. From then on, Jin kept the word Soo-yoon in his heart. Soo-yoon was speechless after hearing his words. Soo-yoon thought to herself, what the is this reason? Because you defeated him? So he must drag her into the Perfumery Association? Can this be regarded as cherishing talents and cherishing talents? But what does that weird test question mean, deliberately making things difficult? I said that only in the association can you get all kinds of spices that you can't imagine, and can you make achievements in the field of perfumery. He was full of confidence, as if everything was within his expectation, but Soo-yoon had to listen to him in the end. Do you think that without these rare spices, it would be impossible to make top-notch perfumes and blend good fragrances? Soo-yoon looked at him and asked. Jin nodded, of course. This is not just him, every perfumer should know it. Although the talent of the perfumer is very important, the raw materials are also more important. The so-called skillful woman cannot make a meal without rice. Without high-quality raw materials, how can she make top-notch perfumes? Okay, wait. Nodding at him, Soo-yoon suddenly turned around and walked towards the corner of the yard. End of this chapter. Shao's sweet wife, she is doted on. Author, Jin Yet. Chapter 305. Chapter 305, I hate being blackmailed the most in my life. Raising his eyebrows, Jin watched her select inside, and quickly picked some spices. After picking, he turned to look at him and walked straight towards the house behind. There were instruments prepared at the back, but they were not complete, and it was obvious that he was deliberately making things difficult. Soo-yoon didn't care about this, and started to refine and prepare the spices without even looking at him. In fact, she hasn't done anything here these 2 days. After all, there are so many ready-made things. It would be a pity not to use them. So there are already refined essential oils, plus other mixing and preparation, and soon there is a faint fragrance coming out. Wherever she went, Hee-jin followed her. Whatever she did, Hee-jin also stared at her, but he didn't make a sound and kept his attitude of watching. But when he saw that she didn't use instruments for analysis at all, she just injected the mixture directly, he couldn't help but said hey. He wanted to speak, but Soo-yoon glanced at him with a sideways look, which made him inexplicably stop. Mouth. That's all, let's just see what she can come up with. For a while, only the sound of clanging was heard, and a refreshing smell floated faintly in the air. Hee-jin considers himself to be a leader among perfumers. Although he is young and although his reputation may not be as high as other top perfumers, he has always felt that he will become a leader in this industry, and there should even be one. Extraordinary attainments, but at this moment, he actually had some doubts. After all, this woman was so relaxed and casual in front of him. He had never seen any perfumer. Making perfume was as comfortable as drinking afternoon tea. She was completely immersed in it and enjoying it. This made her. He also unconsciously became quiet. I don't know how long it took, but it wasn't until Soo-yoon said, "Okay," that he suddenly came back to his senses and looked at the time again. Unknowingly, almost 3 hours had passed. "Try it," she handed a small bottle in front of him, her face full of confidence. Even though he already had some idea, he still took it, put a drop on the test paper with a dropper, and then gently sniffed his nose. Very peculiar smell. It is obviously the sweetness of flowers, but also has the natural fragrance of grass, which reminds people of the flowers with night dew in the morning. The smell is so fresh and natural, but it is hard to put down. I've never seen this perfume in the world. Is it your latest product? Hee-jin asked, tilting his head. To be precise, it's today's new product, she corrected him and said it seriously. Today, he watched her make it step by step, but even so, he was still in disbelief. I don't believe it. Before she could speak, he continued, of course, you did make it in front of me just now, but what I mean is that you should have thought about and prepared this recipe before. Bar. Believe it or not, Soo-yoon shrugged. She didn't care about that. But what we just talked about didn't seem to be new or old ones, but whether we can use the most common spices to make equally outstanding perfumes. But just now, he saw all the spices used with his own eyes, and there were no expensive or rare ones. Besides, as a professional perfumer, he had to admit that this perfume was indeed of the highest quality. Hee-jin looked calm on the outside, but in fact he was very shaken inside. Since he came into contact with this industry, he has not only prepared many perfumes and essential oils by himself, but also met many masters. But it is almost unprecedented that she can make such works using the most common raw materials casually. Pass. This somewhat subverted his cognition. Both he and the teacher he studied with believed that if you want to make top-notch perfumes, you need top-notch spices, just like genes. Excellent genes can produce excellent results. But today, he seems to be a little shaken. Okay, let's talk about the price of Yunko. Soo-yoon was actually not interested in this kind of boring competition, but she couldn't let go of the things she cared about easily. Actually, as you said, you don't care about it at all. There is a lack of top-notch spices. What's more, for you, the rhubarb is not a top-notch or rare kind, right? Where are the things you need? If Hee-jin was unconvinced before, he is now very interested. Looking at her leisurely, his face was full of interest. If you think so, why do you insist on it? As you said, it is not top-notch material, why do you want it so much? In fact, Hee-jin really didn't care much about this Yunko. If she wasn't interested, she would have bought it all. He didn't even bother to go to Mu's house, especially after seeing that she wanted it so much and was even willing to do it for him. When the brassicee was used to make perfume in front of him, he didn't even want to give it to her. What does that saying mean? Don't be afraid of people having principles, just be afraid of people having preferences. As long as you grasp her preferences, you will grasp her weaknesses, and it will be much easier to negotiate terms. That's my business, Soo-yoon said lightly. What I want to do with it doesn't seem to have anything to do with you. Since you won't tell me, I'll just keep it and do my own research. Maybe this brassica is really a rare species, he said deliberately. Hee-jin was extremely confident, thinking that she would definitely give in, and that she might be anxious and beg him, but he was wrong. He didn't understand Soo-yoon's temperament at all. For Soo-yoon, she did want it and fought for it, but what if she was blackmailed with this? Sorry, what she hates most in her life is being blackmailed. You can ask her to do something, and you can discuss it in a good voice, but what if she threatens you? That's so embarrassing. So she smiled blankly, straightened up and picked up her luggage. Then Mr. He can study it by himself, and I won't accompany him. This result was not what Hee-jin wanted. He was stunned for a moment and quickly followed her to the front door. Seeing that she was really leaving and not just pretending, he immediately became anxious and stepped forward to grab her wrist. Yunko, you don't want it anymore? Don't you like it very much? Being grabbed by the wrist, Soo-yoon turned around, frowned and said in displeasure, let go. If you just leave like this, there will be no more rugs. You. After a pause, he said, do you believe that I will burn them all with a fire? End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Shao's sweet wife, she is doted on. Author, Jin Yet. Chapter 306. Chapter 306. Hee-jin can't understand. Looking at his hand holding hers, Soo-yoon's eyes flashed with cold light. She was not so angry when Hee-jin tricked her into coming here and tried to lock her up and trap her. But now that he is holding on to her and saying such words again, she is a little angry. He sneered, since Mr. He has already bought those rugs, it's your money. You can burn them if you like. What does it have to do with me? Besides it hurts. She didn't realize what happened at all, and Hee-jin's arm was restrained by her. Originally he was holding her wrist, but at this moment, his body was twisted in a grappling manner. Not only was his arm pinned away, but his entire upper body was also pressed down. He screamed twice in pain and couldn't help it. Gasps. Young master. The bodyguards and others on the side were about to step forward, but were stopped by Soo-yoon's look. A girl who looks soft and frail, with eyes so spiritual that they are as cold as knives. Especially when she glanced sideways, she also turned Hee-jin's body around. This tugging made him even more painful. The faces of the people around him changed, and they looked at each other, as if they were ready to take action. In fact, Soo-yoon knew how to use appropriate force in her hands. It was just a small lesson for him, and it would not really hurt him. After all, she was still a member of the He family, and this was the imperial capital. Really, if you hurt him, I'm afraid it will be difficult to leave. Mr. He, it's best not to touch girls. After saying this, she let go of her hand and pushed him forward. The force caused him to stumble forward uncontrollably. He staggered a few times and was supported by his own bodyguards. Seeing that their young master was let go, those people rushed forward to catch Soo-yoon, but they heard a loud voice, "Don't move." Hee-jin held his shoulder with one hand and moved the other hand despite the pain. Fortunately, it was not dislocated or strained. It was just a little painful from being pinned, but when she let go, it felt like it was still there. It's not particularly painful anymore. Knowing that he was fine, he didn't let his men do anything. He just looked at Soo-yoon with a deeper look. I've heard that people from the Chu family are all good at martial arts. I didn't expect that a weak woman like you would be very skilled at martial arts. I've seen it today, he nodded. Since Miss Soo insists on not staying, come down, there is no point in forcing others to do anything. If you want to leave, just leave. The special assistant beside him was shocked. Master. The young master tried his best to get this person over and said more than once that he must take over this person. Why did he change his mind just a few days ago? Frowning and waving his hand, he signaled him not to say more and asked the bodyguards around him to disperse. Watching them diverging out of the way, Soo-yoon glanced at him suspiciously. Has this person really changed his mind? Hee-jin didn't change his mind, it was just that after those few hours, he really got to know Soo-yoon. This woman is not just gifted. In terms of perfume making, her accomplishments far exceed her own. Although he didn't want to admit it from the bottom of his heart, Hee-jin knew very well that if there was a real competition, he would not be able to beat her. He finally understood why Mr. Will invited her by name instead of himself when he was in France. Of course, what he knows better is that with these bodyguards, it may not be possible to keep her by force. Even if she is not as good as the other people in the Chu family, it is not a good thing to offend the people in the Chu family. Soo-yoon suspected fraud in her heart, but Soo-yoon didn't want to stay here anyway, so she raised her feet and prepared to leave. At this moment, two cars suddenly came and stopped just in front of them with a creak. Soo-yoon's first reaction was of course that Hee-jin was up to something. She looked towards him, but saw that he was not looking at her, but at the two cars, with a slightly startled look on his face. Immediately afterwards, Hee-jin walked quickly towards the car, and almost at the same time, the car door opened. When he got out of the car, there was an old man with gray hair. He was still holding a cane in his hand, but he looked good. He got out of the car and looked around, and finally his eyes fell on her. How old is he? Soo-yoon was also very surprised. After all, I am in this industry, so I may not be familiar with all my colleagues, but as a perfumer, it is impossible not to know He Lao. He Yuan is the most famous and authoritative perfumer in China. He produced many classic works when he was young. What is most amazing is that now he is over 70 years old and still produces 2 perfumes a year. A classic piece. Every time He Lao's perfume comes out, it is always sold out. However, he himself rarely comes out and only serves as a consultant for the Fragrance Industry Association. Even though he is an advisor, everyone respects him much more than the president. Soo-yoon naturally knew such a famous person, but she didn't expect to see him here. He Lao, why are you here? Hee-jin's status was unusual, and he was also respectful to He Lao. Several people of the same age got out of another car, and they seemed to have come with Mr. He. He Lao only nodded slightly to Hee-jin and walked straight towards Soo-yoon. Are you Soo-yoon? He looked up and down and spoke slowly. Soo-yoon, yes, I am Soo-yoon. Hello, Mr. He. She didn't know the other party's intention, but she still had due respect for her seniors. I heard that you not only declined Mr. Will's invitation, but also declined the invitation from the Fragrance Industry Association? The invitation from the Fragrance Industry Association was not Hee-jin's fault. Is the invitation a fake? Sci-Yao has already told her, and Hee-jin also admitted it in disguise. What does this mean now? I'm sorry, Mr. He, as far as I know, our association did not send me an invitation letter. As for the so-called invitation letter, it seems that someone made it fraudulent in the name of the association. As she spoke, she glanced at Hee-jin. Hee-jin. Institutions. Mr. He laughed, shook his head and said, it's true that it's in the name of the association, but this invitation is also true. If I said that I sent this invitation, would you be willing? Forget about Soo-yoon, Hee-jin was stunned. No one knows better than him. This matter is indeed a case of him doing it for personal gain, and he used the seal of the association privately. But what does Mr. He mean by this now? They clearly knew about it, but they didn't expose him. They even came here in person and took the invitation letter on themselves. Jin couldn't understand it. End of this chapter. Shao's sweet wife, she is doted on. Author, Jin Yet. Chapter 307. Chapter 307. Let's borrow flowers to offer to Buddha. Suyun was stunned for 2 seconds, then smiled and said, Mr. He, please stop joking with me. As far as I know, my qualifications are not enough to join the association. Shaking his head slightly, Mr. He said, hey, you can't look at the problem from the old perspective. Nowadays, society is developing so fast, and talents are emerging in large numbers. To put it bluntly, things like qualifications are just about aging. If you are really strong and capable, you have to endure age to do anything. Do you have to be as old as me to be qualified? What else can I do at my age? He raised a hand and turned slightly sideways. The people who followed him had complex expressions on their faces. Mr. He, you really offend us by saying this. You are the pinnacle of perfumers, the height we look up to. How can your achievements and works be the same as those of us, the juniors can compare? That's right, others echoed, no one can match He Lao's talent. If you push it forward 100 years or push it back 100 years, I dare say that no one can surpass it. Suyun. This is really what I saw. I didn't expect people in the Fragrance Industry Association to speak in this way. Yes, He Lao's achievements are indeed very high, and they are also at the level of monuments in China. However, it would be an exaggeration to say that it was 100 years earlier and 100 years later. Let's not talk about pushing forward and backward, let's just say that in today's world, looking at the international community, there are still many capable people, not to mention those perfume hermits who are not famous and only focus on making perfume. They are famous, such as Will, for example, and some authorities in other countries. He Lao cannot be said to be better than those people. However, it seems that this has formed a tacit atmosphere within the association. When one person praises, the others will nod in agreement, as if anyone who speaks slowly is too ignorant. Suyun couldn't say such words. She remained silent and didn't know the old man's purpose of coming to her. I originally planned to leave here first, and then contact Yao to see where he was. If possible, I would go directly back to Su City. Unexpectedly, I was stopped by such a large formation before I could finish my journey. And from what Mr. He said, it seemed that he had no intention of letting her go. How is it? Mr. He's attention was obviously only on her. He stretched his head forward, looked into her eyes and asked, is it possible that you also want to reject me? His voice was gentle and his attitude seemed to be amiable, but such an ordinary sentence put her in a dilemma. Agree, it goes against her original intention, but if you don't, it seems disrespectful. Mr. He has personally sent out the invitation. If she refuses again, she will appear to be too arrogant. After pondering for a moment, she smiled apologetically at Mr. He, then suddenly took 2 steps back and bowed deeply. Suyun is really flattered to receive such love from Mr. He, but this incident is too sudden. I'm not mentally prepared yet. Are you rejecting me? Mr. He asked with a smile. How dare I refuse, Mr. He? To be precise, I am not qualified to refuse you at all. Her attitude was respectful. It turns out that I also yearned for industry associations, so I set off immediately after receiving the invitation. Only dash. Glancing in the direction of He Jin, she glanced at him, and then continued, after living here for 2 days, I really got in touch with and understood what the association is like. And I feel that my personality is really not suitable for joining the association. Not only will I not be able to contribute to the association, I'm afraid it will also cause a lot of trouble for the seniors. How could this happen? Mr. He wanted to say something else, but she didn't stop and continued, I was about to leave, but I didn't expect that Mr. He would stop by to see me and disturbed you. I feel very sorry, otherwise dash. Suddenly turning around, she walked directly in front of Heejin and looked at him. Heejin actually didn't quite understand the current situation, but no matter what, He Lao wanted this person and tried to get her to stay. At this point, their interests were consistent, so he didn't say much. Just wait and see how this woman copes with it. Unexpectedly, she suddenly walked towards him, and there were so many people surrounding her. It was really unreasonable and embarrassing to be timid in front of everyone, so he tried his best to suppress his trembling voice and looked at her with a confident look. What? He has not forgotten that not long ago, it was this female devil who clamped down on his arm and almost removed it. Because he had experienced it, his memory became more profound. He looked at her warily, as if she were some kind of evil spirit. Without answering him, Suyun smiled at him and suddenly stretched out her hand directly into the pocket of his coat. Heejin. Watching her take out a small bottle of perfume from his pocket, the same bottle he watched her make just now. This smell was unusual and difficult to let go of, so Heejin took it with him, thinking that after solving the matter here, he would go back and study it carefully. He didn't even have time to block it with his hand, and she just took it away. How about I borrow flowers to offer to the Buddha? This will be a trivial greeting gift. I hope Mr. He won't dislike it. He handed it over with both hands to show respect. His eyes flashed, but Mr. He did not refuse to accept it. He took the bottle of perfume from her hand, first looked at it carefully, then shook it a few times, then uncorked the bottle and got closer. The end of the nose. It is still quite far from the tip of the nose, but after all, you can already smell the fragrant fragrance of flowers. It is not entirely accurate to say that it is a floral scent. It is also vaguely mixed with the grassy smell of morning vanilla, which is very refreshing. Did you do this? There was no emotion or anger on Mr. He's face, but his eyes were serious. Suyun shook her head, no, Mr. He and I made it together. After a pause, he pointed in the direction of the door behind him, in the studio in the backyard. Mr. He is very attentive to the reception. Everything in the kitchen is fully equipped. I didn't expect that it's all thought out. Hearing her words, He Lao glanced at Heejin lazily, but it was only for this one glance, and then he looked away. I know his strength well, Mr. He said, I dare not say clearly about your strength, but I understand it more or less. I like this flower very much, so I accepted it. He Lao. Heejin subconsciously called out what he wanted to take away, but someone beat him to it. Reluctant, he said, raising his eyebrows. Heejin was silent. How could it be? If Mr. He likes it, just take it. Lao he nodded and then looked at Suyun. So, you still want to leave? Or do you want to reject me? End of this chapter. Shao's sweet wife, she is doted on. Author, Jin Yet. Chapter 308. Chapter 308. Am I great? Suyun. This old man has a feeling that makes no sense and cannot be explained. There was a stalemate in the atmosphere for a while, and Suyun was stopped here by the old man's words. Although the words were polite and seemed to ask her what she meant, he did not listen to her refusal at all. In other words, from his side, she could only agree but not refuse. This old man is much more difficult to deal with than Heejin. Heejin, it was just a start. He tricked her in and then made things difficult for her. These were all easy to deal with, but He Lao was different. He was so old and in a position of authority. Now he was on crutches. Stand here and invite her again and again. She has already refused twice. If she refuses a third time, by tomorrow, she will be known to the whole country as a woman who does not know how to commend herself. Originally, she thought that it was He Jin's idea, that she was tricked. He secretly used the seal behind the back of the people in the association and secretly sent out such an invitation letter that did not exist at all. The result was unexpected. Soo-yoon even wondered if this was a show they had colluded in advance to catch the duck and force her to submit. Since the old man insists on driving her to this point, she can only be straightforward. The more this happens, the less she wants to join this perfumery association. Just as he was about to say, "Yes, I refuse your invitation, thank you for the invitation," just as his lips moved, he heard a familiar voice calling, "Yunur." The next second, she was hugged by the shoulders. "I said that I haven't come here for so long. It turns out that I met Mr. He." Yao put his arm around her shoulders, glanced at her with a smile, and then turned to look at Mr. He. "What kind of wind has brought you to this place? I'm really lucky to be able to meet you when I come here." Yao, the old man knew him and recognized him at a glance, but he didn't expect that he would also come to the imperial capital and appear here at this time. Especially, that intimate gesture. Her eyes fell on his hand, that big hand with distinct joints and slender fingers, firmly holding her shoulders, but his arm was loosely draped around her neck, as if he was afraid that if he was not careful with his strength, he would crush her. Like her. Following his gaze, he turned and looked at his hand, and he suddenly realized, "Oh, I forgot to introduce you, this is my wife, Soo-yoon. Yunur, this is Mr. He, the special advisor of your top industry association for perfumers. You are really lucky to see him here today." He introduced it generously in front of so many people, but Soo-yoon almost lost her teeth at his two rhymes. When the two of them are together, no matter how close they are, they always call each other by their first names. They rarely use nicknames. It is the first time to hear him call them like this, which is really a bit uncomfortable. But I have to say that I was very happy to see him appear. I don't know when President Si arrived in the imperial capital. If I had known earlier, I should have given him a good treat. He Jin on the side stepped forward and said, "By the way, Mr. He wants to invite Miss Soo to join the perfuming association. I believe it's always nice to see the results." She turned her head in surprise and stared at Soo-yoon, looking very surprised. "Young Master He, are you kidding me? How could this be a joke? Mr. He is here too. If you don't believe me, just ask Mr. He." He was easily pushed to the old man. "Personally, I do have this intention." He nodded slightly and said, "But, your fiancé seems to have rejected me." The people around her all had the mentality of watching a good show. If this little woman didn't know the heights of the sky, then Yao should know the weight of Mr. He. No matter how powerful Huanya is in terms of assets and power, it will not even give He Lao face. However, "That's right," he shouted suddenly, startling everyone, especially the sound was so loud that it made the eardrums buzz. The fright was not just the sound, but also his attitude. What did he say? "That's right? What's right?" His fiancée rejected Mr. He in front of so many people and refuted Mr. He's face. Did he do the right thing? Could it be that his brain was broken, or that he suddenly said the wrong thing? Lao He's expression didn't change much, but the corners of his eyes twitched. "Mr. He, you live in seclusion, so you may not know much about my little wife. If you ask her to mix incense and study spices, she will be very happy, but if you want to join some association or organization, this meeting or that activity, this she can't follow the rules and regulations." Hans said, he waved his hand, "Really not possible. So, what she rejected was not you, but the rules and regulations, and the various activities." Soo-yoon has been silent since he arrived. She had to be convinced after hearing this. As expected, he is more experienced in interpersonal communication. Just now she even planned to directly admit that she was rejecting He Lao. "Since you forced me, there is no need for me to save you this face. but Sci-san resolved the conflict in just 2 words. Listen, listen, it's not you she's rejecting, but the stipulations. How grand. This is a bit of social phobia, Jin said. Actually, as perfumers, we all have it more or less. But after joining the Perfumery Association, it won't be like this. After all, we are all peers. There is also a common language for communication, as for the Articles of Association. Why, Mr. He is going to change the Articles of Association of the Perfumery Association that have been passed down for many years for the sake of my family. Suyun, Yao interrupted him and said unceremoniously, or, I don't know, Mr. He, you have been promoted to the president of the Fragrance Association. Congratulations. Jin. Hushed to the point of being speechless, he clenched his hand hanging by his side to suppress the anger he wanted to explode. In that case, let's forget it. Mr. He finally spoke again, sighed quietly, looked at Suyun and said, you are very talented, I just hope you have a better space to display your talent. If you change your mind, please contact me at any time. He tilted his head, and the person next to him stepped forward and handed over a business card. It has my phone number on it. After saying that, he turned back and got into the car. The others came with him, so naturally they followed him. Yao stood there holding Suyun in his arms, watching the car drive away, then turned his head and looked at her. Am I great? Suyun. I'm so good, shouldn't I be given a reward? He took the initiative and asked for reward shamelessly. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Shao's sweet wife, she is doted on. Author, Jin Yet. Chapter 309. Chapter 309. How is this possible? The two of them spread the dog food without any scruples, completely forgetting that there was anyone next to them. Jin couldn't bear it anymore and stepped forward to stand in front of them. Young Master Si, I know that you are arbitrary in doing things, but on this matter, I advise you that you'd better think about it clearly. Do you think Anya can cover the sky with one hand? As long as she is still working as a perfumer, she will have rules and restrictions that she cannot escape. These words made Suyun very disgusted. She was about to speak, but was held down by Yao. Then she heard his voice say, she is a perfumer because she likes it. If one day she doesn't like it anymore, she doesn't want to. I've done it. Of course, as long as she still wants to do it, Anya can afford it. She glanced at him sideways indifferently, then held Suyun in her arms and walked forward. As she passed by him, she lightly said, Anya cannot cover the sky with one hand, and neither can you. After saying that, he left directly without even giving him a chance to refute. Jin. Maybe he was extremely angry, but for Suyun, it was simply so satisfying. The pent-up anger in the past 2 days has been released, and I just felt that those 2 sentences he said were so refreshing and handsome. She stared straight at him with her eyes. This man really made her more and more fascinated by him. Why are you staring at me? Yao finally couldn't help but said as his eyes were so fiery that it was hard not to pay attention. You were so handsome just now, she praised directly. However, someone was not satisfied. He turned around and stood in front of her, lowered his head and stared into her eyes. Just now. Of course. Even though they are so familiar with each other, when he stares at her like this, she still can't help but feel her heart pounding. Of course it's not just now, she has always been handsome, always handsome. This little girl changed her words quite quickly. Yao's lips curved into a smile, and he was heartbroken when he saw her looking a little shy. He lowered his head and slowly approached her lips. Just when he was about to touch her lips, she pushed him away and said, Get in the car. Not far ahead, the car is already waiting. The person who was interrupted was very unhappy, and his temper was rising and he refused to let go. There was also some resentment in his eyes. You stirred up the fire, and I want to run away again. I. Soo-yoon was at a loss for words. When did I get aroused? She doesn't remember what she did. Don't admit it? Huh. He pressed her head against her head and pulled her closer to his body. They had only been apart for a few days and he missed her so much. Soo-yoon could feel his enthusiasm, and her cheeks turned redder. This is the street, she said in a low voice. Her eyes couldn't help but glance in the direction of the car. When she saw that Soo-feng had gotten out of the car, she felt even more uncomfortable and pushed his chest hard. What about on the street? Is there a rule that couples are not allowed to be intimate on the street? Huh. Stop it. Gritting her teeth, she had the urge to step on him. Mr. As expected, the face of the person who was interrupted turned dark immediately, and without turning around, his back was turned to Soo-feng. Say. Although there is only one word, it can be heard that he is extremely unhappy. Soo-feng was used to being by his side for many years, but at this moment he also looked embarrassed and glanced at Soo-yoon hesitantly. Soo-yoon. Seeing that her eyes were wrong, Si-yao turned around. Seeing Soo-feng's expression, he knew that the matter might be difficult to talk about. Thought for a moment, turned around and said to Soo-yoon, "Get in the car first." I knew that they must have something important, and looking at Soo-feng's appearance, it should be serious. She is not a pretentious person. At this time, she is worried about not treating her as one of her own, and having to talk behind her back. She just intuitively feels that what they want to say will be related to her. However, since Si-yao didn't say it, there might be a reason why he didn't say it. Soo-yoon did not refute, but nodded, "Yeah." She walked over, opened the car door and got in. After closing the door, she looked out the window. Seeing what Soo-feng was talking about, and Si-yao's face was obviously froze, and then he became dignified. The most important thing was that he looked at himself in his direction. Even though she knew that the car window glass had been treated so that the inside could not be seen from the outside, she still subconsciously averted her eyes, as if she had been caught peeping. Looking over slowly, I saw that he was still standing there without moving or speaking, wondering what he was thinking. The breeze picked up the corners of his clothes. He stood there casually and saw the most beautiful scenery on the street corner. However, the whole atmosphere was inexplicably solemn, which made her feel depressed. After waiting for a while, maybe he had finished speaking, or maybe he had made a decision, he strode towards the direction of the car, with Soo-feng following closely behind. Seeing him approaching, Soo-yoon subconsciously moved inside to make some room, while he directly opened the door and got in the car. The cold wind outside brought in the chill, making her shrink her neck unconsciously. It was really a bit cold. There was a blanket in the car, so Si-yao took it directly, pulled it out, put it on her knees, and then took advantage of it and held her hand. A pair of small hands were still warm, wrapped warmly in his palms. In fact, his hands were cooler than hers, but the temperature in his palms still felt warm. I originally wanted to cover her hand, but I didn't expect that I was colder than her. I immediately wanted to let go, but she held her back. "Do you have something to tell me?" she asked bluntly. The two have been together for so long. If she doesn't even have this feeling, then she is too careless about him. Looking at her deeply, Si-yao hesitated to speak. Soo-yoon had never seen him like this before. He had always been a resolute and cheerful person, but his appearance made her feel unsure and even more panicked. After pondering for a moment, he finally told her, "Your grandpa passed away." Soo-yoon couldn't believe her ears. "How is that possible?" "He was fine last time I went to see him. Although he was sick, he was in good health after all." "How could he?" Her excitement was something he expected. He held her hand tightly with both hands and said, "Don't be excited. I just received the news." Don't be anxious. Let's go back now. He knew very well what she was thinking, so he didn't hesitate at all and the car sped towards the airport. Soo-yun's mind was in a mess, and it was really difficult for her to accept this fact for a while. Many images flashed through her mind. Growing up, although her grandfather was very strict with her, even almost harsh, and she used to hate him, but after seeing him again after such a long time, those past events were no longer unknown to her. Before I knew it, it had all dissipated. She has already lost her parents, and now she is going to lose her grandpa. Sci-Yao didn't say anything, he just held her tightly. End of this chapter. Shao's sweet wife, she is doted on. Author, Jin Yet. Chapter 310. Chapter 310, Something has changed in the Chu family. It's not too far to rush back to Zhongcheng from the imperial capital, but fortunately it's not too slow to take a plane. Just rush to the airport first, and then rush from the airport to Chu's house. The whole journey was non-stop. Soo-yun called Chu Chen before getting on the plane. He felt more silent than before. When he knew that she was coming back, he refused. You don't have to come back. You can do your job well outside. Chu Chen, after being shocked, Soo-yun was a little angry. How could I not come back at this time? Grandpa was fine, how could he die suddenly? What happened? She would have understood if she had not been allowed to go back before, but now that her grandfather has passed away, how could she not go back for such a big deal? What's more, after returning to Chu's house last time, she thought that her knot had been resolved, but now, Chu Chen actually refused to let her go back. Silence, unbearable silence. After a while, just when she couldn't help but speak, Chu Chen slowly said, "Okay, if you want to come back, then come back." Alone. She turned around and glanced at the person next to her, and said, "Sci-Yao, come back with me." "That's fine." He seemed to be relieved, and he continued, "Please be safe on the road, and drive directly to your home, don't linger on the road." After giving the instructions, he hung up the phone. Soo-yun didn't come back to her senses for a long time. She was still thinking about Chu Chen's words, and she always felt that something was wrong. "What's wrong?" Sci-Yao asked softly. Shaking her head, she said, "I don't know, I always feel like something is wrong, but I can't explain it. Chu Chen asked me not to go back, but later I agreed." "It's okay if you agree." Nodding, he said, "What's more, if you go back to attend the funeral for Grandpa, this matter is not decided by him or her." But his attitude was very strange also. He asked us not to stay on the road and drive directly to home. I always felt that something might have happened at home. After all, I haven't gone back yet, so it's hard to say a lot of things, but after knowing Chu Chen for so many years, he is not a hesitant person in speaking and doing things. The way he is now is really strange. After pondering for a while, Sci-Yao probably felt that what she said made sense. "Su Feng, go check it out. Who has come to the Chu family recently? Who is taking care of the old man's funeral affairs now, and who is in charge?" Su Feng responded, turned back, and started working on his work. Soo-yun listened a little strangely. The person in charge? The person in charge of the Chu family has always been Chu Chen. Ever since Grandpa retired due to poor health, Chu Chen has been taking care of all the affairs of the Chu family. She is quite sure about this, there is nothing else to check. Looking at her meaningfully, Sci-Yao said, "Don't speak too early, we have enough time." Looking at his watch, he said calmly. There was something in his words. Soo-yun thought about it carefully. Grandpa had always been the head of the Chu family since she could remember. It's just that my grandfather's thoughts were mainly on ancient martial arts, and he didn't pay much attention to the company's business, so the Chu family's family business once went through a crisis. Of course, she was still young at that time, and she had been staying at Chu's house all the time, so she didn't know much about the company. She only vaguely remembered that there had been a big fuss at home at that time, and she vaguely remembered that there was an uncle who was there. It is said that my uncle later went abroad, and the Chu family's business was taken over by Chu Chen, who had just grown up at the time. Fortunately, Chu Chen worked hard, and the Chu family came out of the crisis and ended up in the situation it is today. Since then, Chu Chen has been in charge of the Chu family. Now Si Yao asks, could it be that the Chu family has changed? The plane took more than 2 hours to fly. Si Yao took a blanket to cover her. He felt very distressed when he saw the bloodshot eyes in her eyes. Don't think about it so much. Things have already happened. No matter how sad you are, you still have to do it. Take care of your own body, there are still many things to face and solve next. She understood the truth, but the sadness in her heart was still uncontrollable. Since her parents passed away, she has been staying in the Chu family and living with her grandfather. When I was little, I always felt that my grandpa was not good. Other people's grandpas were kind and amiable. They would often buy delicious snacks and drinks, as well as beautiful dresses for my granddaughter to wear, but she had none of these. In addition to going to school, she practiced martial arts endlessly, wearing one set of training clothes after another, and her diet was extremely strictly controlled. At first, she would cry, but later she realized that crying was useless, so she simply didn't want it again. Slowly, her martial arts skills got better and better, and she gradually grew up. However, her grandfather did not relax his requirements for her because of this, but instead became more strict. It can be said that after her parents passed away, she no longer had the childhood of a normal little girl. She hugged her mother's clothes and cried secretly countless times. She wanted to run away from home countless times. Of course, the ending never worked out and she couldn't leave. No matter how far you go, you will be carried back, and then you will be punished more severely. So later, after she went to college, it could be said that being with Luo Yuanhang was an opportunity, or a trigger, that made her want to get away from the Chu family and the place that made her unhappy. Maybe it was Luo Yuanhang's incident that allowed her to grow up quickly and understand that some things that seem to make you unhappy on the surface are actually for your own good, and some things that seem to be for your good may actually be stabbing you in the back. One knife. Grandpa may indeed be a bit strict, but he will still pay attention to her and help her when she needs it. But now, I have lost him forever. I had a lot of thoughts in my mind. Things from childhood to adulthood flashed through my mind like scenes from a movie. Maybe I was too tired, so I fell asleep all night without realizing it. Si Yao looked down. She closed her eyes and frowned tightly. Even the hands hanging in front of her were clenched into fists. Gently picked up one of her hands, wrapped it in his palm, and used the warmth of his palm to warm her, while the other hand gently smoothed her eyebrows. He had a hunch that this time he went to Chu's house, it might not be so peaceful, it would be a storm, but it was hard to tell how big the storm would be. But, he will definitely protect her from the wind and rain. Hiken. In the car driving to the suburbs, Yao Ying looked worried. Shwe, where on earth are you taking me? An interesting place, Yun Chugzio said mysteriously. I don't want to see the scenery now. Let's go back. She frowned and felt very upset. After all, Yun Zhongcheng had brought that home. Although she was extremely unhappy, she couldn't say anything. However, that little beast was very good at acting. He treated her respectfully in front of her husband and didn't care about her behind his back. She took it seriously. Shwe was kind-hearted and said that she would take her out to relax, but how could she have such thoughts? End of this chapter.